I think we'll go ahead and get started. I appreciate everybody being on time, and I want to welcome you to the webinar Using Research to Create Business Success. And we are very pleased to introduce our speaker, Bill Carlson. He is a customer success manager with Data Axle Library Division, and he's been with them since April of 2008. His responsibilities include ensuring that all who have access to reference solutions understand how to use the database effectively. Bill's presentations are always lively and entertaining, and I'm sure we'll see that as well today. Prior to joining Data Axle, Bill managed a team of more than 20 salespeople at a publicly traded company where he stressed the value of providing world-class customer service. So Bill, welcome, and thank you in advance for your presentation. I'm going to stop sharing and we'll.
Very good. I'll go ahead and share my screen. You should be seeing that here momentarily. Is that correct, Nancy? You're able to see my information?
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day to join us. Really the approach that I like to take is to give you a great overview of, the source of our data, where we're getting all this data, how we maintain that and update that information, obviously making it available to you online. And since you are in the state of New Jersey, all New Jersey libraries, large or small, would have access to our database. So all you would need is a library card with that card number in order to be able to access our database through your public library. So certainly take advantage of that if that's not something that you already possess in the form of a library card, and you could get access to everything that I'm going to show you today. I am going to turn off my screen real quick here because I do have a tendency to talk with my hands, and I don't want to interrupt or disrupt anyone by my motions. So with that said, let's get started. And again, let me reiterate, questions are always welcome, right? I would much rather answer your question where I'm at in the database, where it's relevant to your question, than maybe needing to back up or come back to it at a later point in time. So feel free to ask away. Notice we do offer webinars. So those are on Mondays and Wednesdays typically. You can certainly attend any of those. There's obviously no charge for that. You would access that once you've gone in through your library's website to get to our database here. You would then be able to register for those webinars. And we do have information that I like to point out under the Learning Center. So let me open up that tab real quick. First of all, and you can always reach out to your mentor for assistance with using the database. I have done many trainings for mentors across the state. So chances are they're up to speed. And guess what? If not, you can always feel comfortable reaching out to us, whether it's myself or any of my colleagues that might answer your email or that phone call. They'd be able to help you with whatever search you're trying to do in the database. Under the Marketing and Training Materials tab, let me open this up, and there are some great flyers here that you could refer to that would walk you through. I do have one that's kind of a favorite, and it's the Resources for Businesses. Now, it specifically refers to our U.S. business database, but you could almost interchange any of our module with the business module. So let me open that up real quick. It's a 3-step, 2-page document that would really walk you through how to use our quick search versus our advanced search filters. And then some helpful hints on page 2. So know that you have access to that kind of insight We also have, and you'll notice that on this far right-hand column, these database overviews. So we've put together several of those, one that's specifically related to all of our business databases, one that's regarding our consumer, and then one that's all inclusive. But we do break them out separately as well. As you can see, we have 10 of those. So certainly feel free to open up any or all of those and review that information. Bit more detailed than what you're going to see with a flyer, right? But know that that's great access information there. And we do give you a data dictionary for both our business information as well as our household data. So certainly take advantage of that. If there were a data element that you were like, what does that represent or what does that mean? Chances are you're going to find your answer there. And let me go back to the homepage. And the reason I call this our homepage is because you're seeing that New Jersey State Library logo. So you know you're on that homepage for Reference Solutions. These are my 10 modules that are available through the New Jersey State Library that you could access and utilize that information. And there's, other than having the card and taking the time to do the work, there is no kind of charge with this. It's all completely free to you. Now, I will throw out one caveat. Isn't that the way it always goes? There's always one caveat. I do get this question a lot, so I'll just address this right at the top. Email addresses. People are always interested in email addresses. This access that I'm showing you today is available through libraries across the United States. So we do not have email addresses embedded in any of these records, whether we're talking about businesses and or consumers. That is something we sell aside from the access to the database. And if you had interest in that, there will be a link and it will show you how many email addresses might be available for that particular audience that you're looking at. You can click on that more information and it will give you instructions on whom to contact and start that process, start that query, right? So know that email addresses are not in here. Although there are websites in here. So if knowing about businesses with websites is important to you, you could get to that. With these business modules or with any of our modules, there are different update schedules for this. So our US business database, for example, this is the one we started off with 50 years ago this year. Started off as a list marketing company. Businesses would contact us and say, you know, I need these kinds of manufacturers in these 3 or 4 states. We would sell them that information and so on. Obviously, with the advent of the internet and the ability to then make this information available online, we started in the library space about 29 years ago. And I've been with the company for 15 years. This is our 4th generation. And just like in 1972, we still get sent to us nowadays digitally, thank goodness, phone books. So we get that phone book for this particular area, whatever area it might be in the United States. We bump that digital information up against our current database. Anything that's a duplicate gets rejected. Anything that was a business name, address that we did not have in this universe before would get accepted. And then we begin a calling process. So we have about 350 folks that's all they do, are call these businesses day in and day out. And we do that Monday through Saturday. So those folks are working 7 a.m. Central Standard Time until 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then they also work on Saturday to call these businesses, to try and capture obviously the name of that business, how many employees they have, what line or lines of business are they in, who might be that owner or manager of that location. Do they happen to know the square footage of that business or that office? We try and capture all of that information, and then we're pushing those updates out live every Thursday into Friday morning. So 52 times a year, we're pushing out those updates. On the US historical businesses, which is being fed from here, that information is technically being updated at the beginning of every new month. So you can imagine it's not completely updated until January of every new year, because we have to allow December to lapse, and then we roll into January and do that update for December. So 12 times a year that's being updated. The Canadian business information is updated monthly, jobs and internships daily. US new businesses, these are filings that are being done, and we're getting that information through Secretary of State's offices. We also get that through postal processing. We have a license agreement with the United States Postal Service, and part of that license allows us to get information about information mailings being sent to a particular business address. So we're capturing it that way, also through utility hookups. So as we learn about these new business filings, our job becomes, number one, obviously trying to reach them so that we can verify them. Capturing, again, the type of business that they're in. Do they have multiple employees? If so, how many, etc. Typically, we can do that within about 30 to 45 days of them being added here, and we will then give them a full record in the U.S. business database. But that partial information, because it is quite partial, that partial information will remain in here for 1 year. That way, people can go back maybe the last 3 months or the last 6 months, and they can look in a geography and they can see the types of businesses that have been filed for in a particular community, whether that's a county, a city, a couple of zip codes. You get to be the author in terms of how that looks. So we'll capture that information, push it out weekly, stays in here for 1 year, and then at that point in time, they're in the U.S. business database, either as a verified record, and as you can imagine, sometimes we don't get a phone number for some of these brand new businesses. If we can't get them verified, they'll go into our unverified businesses, which I'll show you where that's at, also in the U.S. business database. And of course, the third file that we have in here would be those closed businesses, right? We do learn about closures, and when we do that, we'll update that as well. On the U.S. healthcare, the standard white pages, our consumer lifestyles, and our Canadian white pages, those are all updated monthly. And then the last one here, the U.S. new movers, new homeowners. Great information that is coming again from the U.S. Postal Service's National Change of Address. We're updating that weekly. They stay in here for 1 year. So I'll show you how you can use these various tools by which to, depending on if you're doing business B2B or B2C, you've got both covered here. And the nice thing about all these modules is they all search the same way. Couple of other tools I'd like to mention. Certainly have an app. So if you're an app user, there are 2 modules available in that app. That would be the business and the consumer lifestyles. And then last but not least, we have these personal accounts. Once you've logged in through your library, you can come to this section and you can register using whatever email address you want to use, and then creating, of course, a password. That would allow you to then log in, and you can save your searches done from these various modules. There's one exception to that, and that would be the jobs and internships. You're not able to save these, but all these other 9 you can certainly save and come back to them at whatever point in time if you'd like to. So if you save some business records from a search that you did, let's say that you saved them and you came back to that search, let's say a couple months later. there are 8 potential updates that have been done to this universe. Then it may change the content numbers a bit, right? Let's say that you had 250 that you saw when you saved that search. Come back to it 2 months later, there might be 252, right? Or conversely, it could go the other way. There could be 248 because we've taken one out as a unverified record and we learned about one that closed. So we'll give you the latest and greatest that we have each time you re-enter that saved search. I'm going to go ahead and open up the US business database. And this would be very true if I were in the new business or the consumer lifestyles. Whenever I open up any of our modules, it's always going to come to this quick search screen first. In this case, under the US business database, I could look for one company. Maybe there's one company that I intend on mirroring myself after. So I'd kind of like to look at their record. Or maybe it's a company that is a typical company you would do business with, and you want to identify what their primary SIC code is. And if you're not familiar with that, that's the standard industry classification. We'll have that in every single one of our records. So you could look at that to then be able to do a larger search using that insight so you could pull in more businesses like that one. Could also look for an executive. Maybe you knew an executive that was at a company. You've learned that they've left, but you don't know where they've left to. You could certainly try that first name, last name search to find that executive. You could even do a search of all businesses across any city or state. Could even do a reverse phone number lookup. And one of the tools that I like to show folks, and I'll just use a city there in New Jersey. I'll go with Newark. So I'll grab my Newark and then, of course, the state. And whenever I produce results from here, when I'm in quick search, they're only going to be those verified records that I mentioned. The unverifieds and the closed I can reach or find when I'm in advanced search, but when I'm in quick search, only going to be verified. So across Newark, I have over 11,000 results that are verified businesses. The tool I want to show you is this charts tool. This helps you to understand the types of businesses that are in that community. In this case, Newark, right? It could be any community. So it's always going to give me that look from the SIC code standpoint. As you'll notice, we also have the NAICS codes. That's the North American Industrial Classification System code. When President Bill Clinton was in office, he signed that very first trade agreement between us, Mexico, and Canada. That's when the SIC codes were technically retired in favor of the NAICS codes, because all 3 countries agreed to use this coding system to be able to track products going across those international lines. The SIC codes, back when Uncle Sam was using those, they were only a 4-digit SIC code number at maximum length. We've actually added to that, and we started doing that years ago, years before the NAICS codes were ever born. We've made them a minimum of 6 digits and a maximum of 9. So we've made them much more granular. I would always encourage people, stick with the SIC codes. And if you are producing a report that needs to include a NAICS number, you could always refer to that, because we'll give you both codes in every single record. So here's my top 7 SIC codes across Newark. Physicians and surgeons are at the top of that list simply because they're all 1099 guys and gals. It's followed by restaurants, then churches, attorneys. Notice we do have records for automated teller machines. And I mention that because you are able, if you would like to, maybe you don't want those records in your output. I'll show you in advanced search how you could choose to omit them. And that can be true with any kind of business, right? That you don't want included. So I have my top 7. By the way, this is all printable or can be made part of a PowerPoint. And then here's my full report. 63 pages in length. Will always give you that primary SIC code. So think of Walmart. Walmart's primary SIC code is that of a department store. Their secondary and tertiary codes would be those departments. So pharmacy, for example, or automotive, or groceries, electronics, etc. So, but their primary is going to be that department store. So we'll always give you that primary SIC code, the description for that particular business, and then the number of records that apply. In fact, I was out in New Jersey last November and did a presentation in, where was I? I was in Hasbrook Heights, and I had done a presentation for their local chamber of commerce. There was a new chamber member who owns a beauty salon. So she really got quite excited when she was able to take a look at her competition, right? So if you wanted to get into a group of these particular records, you can always just click on that number and it will take you right into that group. So you'll always have that available to you. And if you would like to change it up, you could, obviously, to NAICS code, the zip codes in that particular community, since we're looking at Newark. Could change it up to sales volumes. I know that oftentimes when I've worked with SCORE or small business development offices, they love this kind of insight because this could be a list of those businesses that you intend on selling a product or service to. So it gives you the ability to simply include this, because it's all printable or could be made part of a PowerPoint, in your business plan. Can be some great insight. And of course, I could always switch it up to number of employees as well. So it just depends on what you might need. Know that that's always available. And we got to all this information by simply putting in the city of Newark, New Jersey, and selecting the charts tool. Most of the time, people bypass the quick search altogether and they go right to advanced search. And by the way, additional filters, that is the back door into advanced search. I didn't want you to click on additional filters thinking you'd see something other than what's noted right here. So we give you a variety of filters that you could utilize to get a very specific list of businesses that you're interested in. You could do a search. We saw under quick search how you could search by company name. This one will allow you to search for multiple companies. So if IBM were one of those companies, you could add that. You know, if GM were another one of those companies, you could add that. You can add as many companies by name. The kicker is it needs to be the name as that business is advertised. I help somebody find a business, but not using the business name because they had the wrong name. They thought the name of the business was Baltimore Licks. It was an ice cream parlor. So we ended up finding it by doing a keyword search for ice cream parlors in Baltimore and learned that the actual company name was Be More Licks. So the kicker with the company name is it needs to be as it's advertised. You could search by legal name if you had a legal name versus a company name. We'll always give you both of those in our records. You could use any of this executive information. Maybe you want executives that are owners, for example. Maybe you would like to see records with an owner present. You could always do that and then get just those records that have that owner. Perhaps an owner, if an owner weren't available, maybe a manager would be appropriate. You could add both of those. You may get both in some cases, but you're for sure going to get one or the other. So know that that's always available. And the same thing would be true with gender or ethnicity. Business type. Easiest way to search for business records is by that keyword, because frankly, not many people know SIC codes or NAICS codes, right? It's just not something that you do. So all you have to do, as it notes here, if you wanted just restaurants, type that in, search for it, and we'll produce those results for you. If you needed ice cream parlors or hotels or dry cleaners or manufacturers, it does not matter. You can search for that, and then we'll produce those results. And I'll show you more along those lines here in a moment. I do like to point out this major industry group, which is just the SIC codes, by the way. And it's just as Uncle Sam used to present this information. So they had these categories that they linked together. So agriculture, forestry, and fishing were linked between 1 and 9. And then it goes from 10 to 14 for mining and construction, 15 through 17. Will always give you, by selecting this plus symbol, the definition for each of those 2-digit codes. Uncle Sam, as I mentioned, had a 4-digit code, and this was as granular as it would get. We added 2 more to that so we could give you this kind of specific information. So if you were looking for businesses that were handyman services, you could drive in just those kinds of records. I know that some people prefer this approach because it's a visual approach, right? It's kind of a stair step to the information that you may ultimately be needing. Then it's just a matter of telling the system what geography you need, and we would produce that information for you. So either way, either keyword or that major industry group will get you to what you need. Geography speaks for itself. I will show you this map-based search tool. You might choose to use that. Phone speaks for itself. Number of employees. That's one of those questions we're asking in our verification phone calls. And when we're asking that question, about 72%, it varies from time to time, and it varies by industry, frankly. But about 72% of those businesses will give us an exact number. Those that don't answer that question, either because A, they don't know, they know they're doing some hiring, but aren't certain what they're going to end up with, those folks, or those records, I should say, what we'll do is we'll look at their peers in that same area, and then we'll assign a range. It could be 1 to 4, it could be that 5 to 9, etc. We'll apply that range so that when you're looking at that record, you see an actual number, you know we got that in our phone call. You see a range, we applied that. And with sales volume, we learned a long time ago with private companies, you don't ask a private company, what do you think you're going to make this year, Joe? And Joe's probably going to say, you know what, I'm ending this phone call. What we'll do is with that sales volume for private companies, we'll model that and we'll use information like the number of employees, how long they've been in business, what line or lines of business are they in? They could be in multiple, right? Also, where they're physically located, because we need to understand that so that we can apply some adjustments regarding taxes and payroll kinds of issues. And then finally, we also get some information through the Bureau of Labor Statistics in order to produce that modeled number for that sales. If it's a publicly traded company, of course, that sales volume will come from their 10K report. But if it's private, it's always modeled. And the same is true with business expenditures. On ownership, we give you lots of ways, of course, looking at public or private. If you would like to find businesses that are single entity businesses, for example, you do have the ability under headquarters and branch to make that a driver. So you could select that so you can only see those businesses that are solely owned. And we do have home-based businesses. So if that's important to you, you could look at those, or you could choose to exclude them.
Bill,
And then, yes,
hi, it's Nancy.
Nancy who? Nancy
Yes.
Drew. Hi,
Uh,
Nancy.
Albert asked, and I think this might be the answer here. So he asked whether you can capture online companies versus brick and mortar. Would home-based businesses then be considered online?
They could be, and I would say that with a caveat. If we're looking for online businesses that do certain types of things, you might find those as a home-based business. I can tell you we do not have every single business that could be solely online listed in our database. And I'll give you an example. I have a niece in Chicago, been in business for probably close to 15 years now. She has 5 other ladies that work for her. They're all bonded. What they do is they'll do everything about event planning. So whether it's a party or maybe a family is going on vacation and they want somebody to watch their home. Maybe they have children and the husband and wife both work and they can't get a way to get the kids to a doctor appointment. They would do that. They do all of those types of things. She is not listed in our database. She has this great client list all on the Chicago North Shore. She has obviously her automobile to get to these different appointments, and her employees that she's responsible for, but she couldn't go into a bank and get a loan against that list of her customers, right? So she could not decommission her website, move out of the United States, and nobody would be the wiser, right? So unless we're able to get that verification done, they're not going to be in our database. But great question, Albert. Very good question. I see two, now that I'm looking at this other screen, I see that there were 2 questions. Was there a second one there, Nancy?
Oh, there's things I can answer myself. So
Okay.
I did.
Excellent. Very good. Let me start with or begin again with ownership. So I was just about to mention that we've added these 3 more filters and we just added them 10 days ago. So we're getting that female, veteran, and minority-owned business information through the SBA PPP loans. So if that would be something that you would like to use as a filter, by all means, you could do that. Financial data, you can use any of those as options as well. Special selects. I mentioned at the top that we have those web addresses. Could certainly use that as a filter, or social links. If you're looking for businesses that are newer businesses, I would use years in the database versus year established, simply because year established isn't 100% fill rate, but by gosh, we know how long we've had them. So if that would be a helpful option for you, know that you could always do that. Professionals, all or one. We saw when we looked at Newark, for example, that there were lots of doctors and surgeons. If you're putting together a list, and especially if you're putting it together for mailing purposes, you might want to consider changing that default of all to 1. You'll produce fewer records. You'll get a primary contact at that doctor's office that you could in fact mail to, instead of mailing to every doc, every attorney, every CPA in those various offices. So know that that's a tool you could take advantage of. And then we give you lots of ways to exclude, including, and we just added this about 10 days ago as well. So we know that a lot of times people don't want those ATM machines or those kiosks. So if that would be something that you would like to omit from your records that you're about to see, you could always go about doing that as well. And maybe you don't want churches, or maybe you don't want bars, or maybe you don't want department stores. You can omit, just like you can include, you can omit any type of business by doing that keyword search. Notice you can also omit previously saved searches. And the reason you might want to do that is, let's say that you built this business search and you had some 500 results when you built it originally. We save those steps that you took to produce that 500, not the actual number itself. If you wanted to see those new business records that have been added, you could choose to omit your previously saved search. We'll always tell you the steps that you took to build that search. You could then go back and reproduce that using those same filters that we're going to tell you about. Then you'll only get those new records that have been added. Might be a great way for you to do that. Let me do a search here, and we're going to use the keyword, and I'll just use restaurants because I need some numbers, and restaurants generally always produce what I need in terms of numbers. Nancy, what county are you in?
I'm in Somerset County.
Okay, I'm going to use Somerset for this example. I realize some of you may be elsewhere, but I'll use Somerset for this example. So I'll grab New Jersey, and you can see I've got all those various counties listed there. I could either scroll through or I can begin to type that in, and there's my Somerset. I can add that to my list. Now, I realize that where you live, you may want to include a county perhaps in New York, or from Pennsylvania, or some other area near you. You can always just change up that state to the appropriate state and then choose that county from that other state. So you can add as many of those as you need to. I'll just look at Somerset here, and let's take a look. I'm going to update my count. That's my number of those verified records. I want to see what I have specifically for restaurants. So I have 793. I've got plenty here in Somerset. My magic number was 300, and I've got well over that. In fact, I want to show you, there's that information. It always defaults to verified. I could pull in these unverified, and I would encourage you on occasion, especially if you're selling a product or service to other businesses, you might want to include some of those unverifieds. Some of those unverifieds could be those online businesses we were just talking about, right? So I would not necessarily, throw that out with the baby's bathwater. May want to check that periodically. And then, of course, close speaks for itself. I also want to point out, notice I'm looking at all SIC codes. I do have the ability to change this up to that primary SIC code. Watch what happens to my number now. So it dropped it down to 610. So what it took out are businesses like bowling alleys, for example. Bowling alleys, most of them I've ever been in, always had a little restaurant in there. We've taken them out of the mix because that's not their primary line of business. So if you needed to filter like that, you could always do that as well. I'm going to go ahead and produce these results. Those are the only filters I'm going to have. Keyword and then the county. Let's chart this again. We know we're looking at restaurants, and we know we're looking at them in Somerset County. So then the system will break it down by the city and then zip code. So here are my top 7 cities. And then, of course, I've got the 2 pages worth of other communities in the area. So that's one way to look at it. Of course, I could always switch that up to that sales volume number and or number of employees. So if that kind of insight would be important to you, know that you definitely have that. I could get into this group of 250 if I wanted to see that group of 250 restaurants. I could get to that information as well. Of course, it's going to be in Somerset County, but possibly in any of those cities. Also have another tool. It's our heat map. It's a density map. So let me overlay that information against the Somerset County. So where you see these red areas, lots of restaurants in those areas, yellow, fewer, green, even less. And of course, where there's no color, or at least none of those three colors, there are no restaurants in those areas. You can always look at it from that perspective. And of course, we'll give you all those various zip codes. If I wanted to get into the 76 and just that group of 83, I could do that. I could also alter this view of the map, and it mentions it right here. So once you alter the zoom to where it's less than 300 records, this is what will happen. And keep an eye on this column here. As I begin to drill in, and I might need to reposition the screen, as I begin to drill in, the system will then pinpoint all those locations for me and gives me that view. So I also have that legend on the side here. If I wanted to know where this Applebee's was at, I could click on that and it takes me right into that area. So this might be another tool you want to use, especially if you're looking at, maybe you have some kind of product you wanted to sell to restaurants. You might want to know who's where and who's next to them, right? You could always do that. And that's also something you could print off. Now, you do have the ability to be able to download this information, and it will tell you how many downloads you can do at a time. So it's 100. There are 4 records, there are 25 records per page. So that would be 4 pages. I'm on page 1. I can advance to page 2. I can select that box next to company name and keep repeating that step through the 4th page. And once I'm ready, I can select my download. Notice you can print, or I could save the entire universe, not just the ones that I put the check marks next to. And then I can simply go to download. We're always going to give you comma delimited first. So if you'd like to make mailing labels, you're set up to do so. Summary would include the name of that business, their address, phone. It would also include that owner's information, name, title, number of employees, sales volumes, etc. You can either email that to yourself, and maybe you're working with a partner and you want to send it to them as well. You could do it that way, or you could download that information. If that's what you've chosen, this is what you'll see. Know that my Excel document here is static. You can't add anything else to mine. But if you open up your own version of Excel and then simply come up here to the upper left-hand corner and click there, and then you could copy that information from my page, put it on your own Excel document. Then you could simply minimize yours, come back here, close mine. It'll always leave you on this instructional page. You can then simply go back. Now you do need to deselect these check marks. Easiest way to do that is through Revise Search. It takes you back to that original group. It doesn't forget how you did that. You can view your results. I'm back on page 1. All the check marks are gone. I simply enter in the number 5 here, hit enter, and then I'm ready to go and get more downloads. So again, I could do that through page 8 and select my download and go through that process again. So know you can do that as much as you need to, like I said, 100 at a time, 4 pages at a time. If you're, let me throw out this caveat as well. If you intend on cherry picking, and let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to revise this and view my results again. let's say that I wanted this record and I wanted this one and I wanted this one, and I'm going to go on to my next page and I want this one and I want this guy. And then I'm going to go on to my third page, grab these two, go to my fourth page. Now I'm a long way from 100 records. I only have 9 selected so far. But it is page sensitive as well. So you would want to download those 9 records and then start off again. You'd have to deselect those check marks, but then you would be able to go to page 5 and start on there and start cherry picking from there as well. Just know that it is page sensitive, and that 4th page or 8th page or 12th page, etc., would be where you would need to stop, do your download, and then go back and get some more. I do know that on occasion people like to cherry pick.
And Bill,
yes,
another question. If so, if I only wanted Bernardsville and Basking Ridge, my 2 local towns, I could either do a original search that is more refined.
Right.
Or you
could just do those 2 towns.
Yep. Yeah, or I can resort these lists on any of those headings.
Exactly. So if I wanted to do that by city, I can do that. Yep. And then I could just make certain that as I'm doing my download, I'm only getting those records for that particular city, right?
Yep.
The other thing that I could do is, since I have that chart capability and it's always going to break it down first by city, I could then go to maybe I want Round Brook, right? Bound Brook, not round. Bound Brook. I could just click on that number 31 and it will take me to those. I could do my download of these. It's only 2 pages, so I could do it all at once. And then I could always go back. It'll bring me back here to the chart, and then I could go on to another city that I might need, right? So that'd be a quick way to do it as well.
Thank you.
You bet. Great question. So let's do this. I want to see real quick. Oh my goodness. I'm going to go back here. I am back. Let's see. What did I do? I want to undo that. And there is an Arby's here. Good. I like to use Arby's as my example, especially when we're talking about corporate tree. Oftentimes people aren't aware that Arby's is part of a huge company. So I can get to that corporate information. The up arrow will take you to one record and one record only. It would either be the subsidiary that this Arby's location would report up to, or if there weren't a subsidiary, it would take you to the ultimate parent. This icon will show you their entire organizational structure. So you can click on that icon. It will then take you to, there's that Arby's location that reports up to this Arby's restaurant group out of Atlanta, but they're ultimately owned by this Rourke Capital Group. It's a private equity firm also out of Atlanta. They have a total of 43 subsidiaries and almost 40,000 branches. We have a legend that runs across the top here. So if you needed to know what this PV stood for, quickly you can identify that's a private company. And if you wanted to see the other 42 subsidiaries, since this is 43, you can simply collapse it or close that, and there they all are. So Arby's is actually a part of all of these folks under this umbrella, of course. But I'm sure you're looking at that list and you're seeing a lot of those companies are probably in your very own community, right? They added Dunkin' Donuts. It was 2 years ago this month. I noticed that back in October of 20. That's when they brought them on. They also added this company about 3 months ago and Two Men in a Truck about 6 months ago. So we'll always give you that kind of structured information if you would like that. Always available. And whenever I'm working with job seekers, I always point this out to them because they should know a little bit about the company that they're interviewing with. And just because they're interviewing with Arby's doesn't mean it's not a bad idea to know about the entire structure. So all of that is available. And I can always get back to that record when I go into that Arby's record. Where did my Arby's record go? It converted back. Shame on you. There it is. I can go into that Arby's record, and this would be a standard business record. I'm going to always have that location information first, their phone numbers, their website and social links. I can also get to that corporate tree information inside the record. Some of those job listings that are noted through Indeed. There's my industry profile that drove in all these restaurants. I had mentioned at the top of the presentation that there might be those times when you wanted to understand, you had this customer, this other company, you wanted to understand what their primary line of business was. There it is. You can always jot that down. So you could write that number down, and you could always do another search, of course, an advanced search for more businesses like that really good customer that you currently have. In this case, a business profile. So you might glean some information about that company by reviewing that profile. We won't necessarily have a profile on every business, right? Joe's Garage that works on small engines, probably not going to have a business profile on him. I do have Google Maps embedded in here because we have that latitude and longitude in the background, so we know where those businesses are at. Then I have the business demographics. So we just updated this record in September. And when we contacted them, they told us they had 18 employees. That's important because that does go into our modeled information for that sales volume. We know it's a private company, ultimately owned by Roark Capital Group. We have a couple of managers listed there. We also have company news. This is where I was at. I was actually doing a training, and when I selected this, I happened to notice that Dunkin' Donuts was going to be added to Roark Capital Group. That was the heading of an article. So we're getting this through Bing, and it's loaded on the fly. So the last time this was updated was yesterday at 10:43 a.m. And then you can get to older articles here as well. Stock data, of course, we know it's a private company, so there is no stock data. But if this were a publicly traded company, but a branch of a publicly traded company, we're not going to have stock data on that branch. It would only be on that parent. Then I have some of those business expenditures, followed by some historical information, including historical records. And note, it goes back to 2003. Now, we started keeping track of historical information in 1997, but because this could get awfully long, right, we only go back to 2003. I can open up any of these years by clicking on the business name adjacent to that year, and it will open up that record. And notice, this one goes back to 2001. So if you wanted to go back in time, you could do so. Or if you wanted to go forward in time, you could do so. So know that that's always available to you. And then I have 3 other sections, UCC filings. So if they took out a loan and put something up as collateral, that would be captured there. Nearby businesses, again, based on their location. And then of course, other competitors. So each and every record will be set up just like this. And I do want to point out this data feedback button. It's at the bottom of every record and it's at the top of every record. So let's imagine for a moment that you had an appointment with this particular Arby's. You were trying to sell them something, and in the course of that conversation, something was brought up about number of employees, and they said, we have 21. Clearly, that's not the number I have listed. You can tell us about the fact that we need to contact them and re-verify that information. So you can simply select this data feedback button, and it notes it's going to be sent off to these researchers who typically are able to turn those queries around within 24 to 48 hours normally. What you would do is you would select that number of employees, put in that number of 21, fill this information out, submit it to us. We'll send you a thank you for your query immediately. And then, like I say, within 24 to 48 hours, you'll get notice about that update. Now, when we call, if they come back and say, no, we only have 20 employees, then that's the number we're going to put in. So know any of our records. I can't update any of this stuff, but I can update our records, whether they're business or consumers. Any questions regarding the production of that particular search or those filters that I used?
I do not see any questions.
Okay. I want to show you, I'm going to revise this. I want to show you this map-based search tool. And by the way, this can be used in many of the other modules as well. So I'll get rid of the county. But before I go to the map tool, I do want to include some additional filters. So I'll tell the system I want to see 1 to 4 and 10 to 19, and they need to have web addresses. Then I can open up the map-based search tool. So you would only deploy this last. There's my option to open. And now the system is going to present this map of the United States. It's waiting for you to tell us where you'd like to go, right? So it could be a city state, it could be a zip code, it could be county state. Just depends on what you want to do. Nancy, what's a zip code where you live or work or play or enjoy life?
07924.
07924. And I'll say go. So then the database will go right into that area, and it gives me these various tools. So I could draw my own shape. I could use a true radius. I have some predetermined boundaries. Could even create a drive route. So when drawing a shape, it's as simple as selecting that option and deciding where you want to begin, right? You don't have to use any of these areas already mapped out on the map, right? Maybe I want to start right here in the middle of this park, and I want to come up here, and I want to come down here, and I want to go to the far hills. And that's the extent of the area I want. I have 16 results in that shape that match my criteria. If that's all I need, I can come up here to the upper right-hand corner and select done. And as you can see, I'm ready to give you those 16 results. So that's one way to use one of those tools. With a true radius, and I'll back out just a little bit on this one, with a true radius or the draw shape, either of them will go out 150 miles. Now, if you were going to go out that far, you would need to back out for it quite a ways in order to get that 150 miles in. If you wanted to use that radius, you click it, you come to where you want to begin. If this is where I wanted to start at, it's click, hold it, and drag it away. So you can see I'm already out to like 15 miles right there. If that were the area I wanted, I can let go of it. The system will calculate. There are 633 results that match my criteria in that area. That's all I need. Again, done, and then view results, and I'll have those 633. Maybe as you're looking at this, you're going, you know what? There's a couple of communities I don't want to include in here. I do have the ability either using a true radius again, or I can draw my own shape. Maybe I don't want to include Morristown or Madison for whatever reason. I can double click. There are 43 out of this 633 that are in this area. I can double click in there and I can choose to exclude that. Just depends on how you want to break this down, right? Or this could be a pumpkin that's winking at us. It clearly has no teeth, but it's winking. That's why that eye is closed. So just depends on how you want to look at that. Or these are my predetermined boundaries. So let's go with the county selection. Notice you can get as narrow as a neighborhood. So there's my counties in the area. Gosh, I'm going to back out on that a little more. There's my counties in the area. Of course, here's my Somerset. So I've got 665 results in there, as opposed to this county, as opposed to Warren, as opposed to this one. Just depends on what I want to do. I know salespeople love this because they're able to then decide based on what they're seeing for results where they may want to start their efforts or initiate their efforts. And if that's what I wanted, were those 4, I could say done. And as you can see, I'm ready to give you those 666 results. My goodness, how does that happen? Notice that you can really build this as you need to, as it needs to work for you. I also have one additional option, and that would be my ability to create a drive route. So if I wanted to go from, let's go from, what is that? Where is that? I'll just do mine. I'll just say Omaha to Lincoln real quick. Omaha, Nebraska to Lincoln, Nebraska, which is just about 55 miles away. And then the buffer distance, notice it says the maximum is 15 miles. That's 15 miles on one side of the roadway. Of course, it's going to do both sides. So it's actually 30 miles. I'll just say 0.3 for 3 blocks on either side. So between Omaha to Lincoln, there are 54 results that match my criteria that are in that area. If that's what I wanted, I can say done. I can view my results. And remember that little thing called the heat map. I can now use this heat map to overlay all of those locations. And let me show you how to do this. So at first blush, it's always going to give you this look of this storm that might be over part of Nebraska there. That's not a storm. That's those locations. But I can begin to drill in. And as you can see, it's starting to separate that the closer I get. And it's giving me that legend on the left-hand side. So when it's thinking, you want to give it a moment. So there's my Omaha to Lincoln with all those locations on that side. So great way to be able to do that if that were important to you. I helped a gentleman that was interested in finding businesses, certain manufacturing businesses up in Wisconsin between 2 communities like this. So your between could be a physical address to another physical address. It could be a street corner to a street corner. It could, you get to decide how that ultimately will look.
Bill, a couple of questions have come in.
Excellent.
I know there's a lot of information, and as you described the individuals who are making all these phone calls, How reluctant are businesses to give out this information?
You know, there are, I mentioned that I was up in Hasbro Heights almost a year ago, November now, and there was a gentleman that was in the chamber meeting who's a business owner, owns an event planning business. He asked me the very same question. He said, in fact, he added to his question with a statement, and he said, Bill, now there is no way that I have time to spend with somebody I don't even know who's asking me these questions about my business. He said, I would hang up. I said, fair enough. I understand. People are busy, don't know who this source is, doesn't want to answer any of those questions. Tell me this, Eddie. I got to know Eddie very well. I said, tell me this, Eddie. When you answer the phone, do you answer it with your business name? He said, well, of course. I said, thank you for verifying. So I wasn't able to verify everything in my phone call with Eddie, but I got the most important, well, actually two most important pieces of information verified: the name of the business, and I know that phone number is correct. So we can look online and see if Eddie's business is at that same address, and then we're done. So granted, there are those people that won't necessarily answer everything, but we have other resources that we can pull in so we can validate that address information. Great question.
I have a second one, and I was wondering the same thing. Arlinda asked, is this relevant? Is this relevant for nonprofits as well?
Absolutely. I was just in St. Louis last week doing a number of these presentations in person, and two of those groups that I did presentations for were specifically nonprofits. Nonprofits need information about other businesses just like retail businesses do. So I can get that executive information. I can get that contact address that I might want to reach out to, or that phone number that I might want to use to reach out to. When I'm doing a search in the business database, maybe I want to pull in just those HR executives, right? So that I can identify, and I went too far there, so that I can identify those companies with that HR contact that I might begin with, right? Now, I don't know if those businesses have a propensity to donate to nonprofits, but I have a starting point to find that information out. Great question. And I would add to that, and I showed this. Well, first of all, any other business questions, because I'm going to use that as a jumping off point, because I want to show you our consumer information, and I have information about consumers who are charitable donors. Now, in terms of what charities, I don't know, but they are charitable donors. Any other business questions, though, specific to this database?
Tanisha asked, have you experienced someone using this research site for narrowing down a short-term rental location?
No, but I'm sure you could, because you can find apartments in the database. So in terms of short-term, that's a relevant description based on what short-term might mean to anyone, right? So but I would be able to identify all those kinds of lodging opportunities.
That's all the questions I have right now.
Okay. So we're on the US business database, but I'm going to select reference solutions. As it notes here, that's my main navigation. Brings me right back here to the home page. And I'll go right here into consumer lifestyles. So unlike the business database where we're call verifying, this information isn't call verified. We are getting it through a variety of partner resources. So everything from surveys people may have completed. And if you think about anytime you've traveled, whether that's air or rail, or rental car, staying at hotels, staying at resorts, you always get follow-up surveys. So we're getting that information from various surveys. We're getting it from memberships people have joined. Let's say that you've got a new Chevy product and you take that in to have your service work done. We're getting it from those kinds of relationships. I was not in this database when I first moved back into the city limits of Omaha. I had a hunting dog who was my best friend, and he got sick. I took him to the vet. The vet determined that it was probably an allergic reaction to something with this dog food formula that I had been literally feeding him for years. And I was like, wow, that's odd. And he said, well, something's changed about it, right? So he said, let's get you an all meat and all fish or an all poultry product. Then he said, do you have a PetSmart or a Petco near you? Because I'm going to give you 4 or 5 of these dog foods you should try. Went to Petco because it was close to where I buy my groceries. Was offered a PALS membership, probably my second or third trip through. Ended up having this PALS membership. I provided them my name, my physical address, no phone number, didn't give them an email address, but they mailed me then that various information about discounts that I could get at Petco. Within a couple of months, I became identified as a dog lover. Under advanced search is where you can see all those filters. They're right here under lifestyles. I mentioned charitable donors. So here's my charitable donor definitions. Charitable donor, wildlife and environmental donor. So that would be the only one that is really specific. So if you wanted to identify those charitable donors, maybe you want to reach out to that audience about your charity. You could certainly do that. Let's do this. We'll do your county, and I'll do 1 per household. And I want my county. There it goes. I'll say New Jersey. And I'll say Somerset. There, I've got my count. And again, just like with the business database, I can include as many or as few as I want. The reason I did 1 per household is I don't want multiple names at the same address, right? I just want one contact, the primary contact at that household, as what we would refer to as the head of household. And I would say that the database is slanted towards the female gender simply because of the shopping that they do for the household. So I have a total, as it relates to those charitable donors, of 33,818. And there is a scoring system here. It's 0 through 9. 0 means they've got no interest in that category. 9 means they're very heavily interested in that area. We'll only show you those people who score a 6 or higher. So this number could be 2-3-fold this number, right? But they're not all falling in that 6 to 9. We won't include any 5s. We won't include any 4s. We won't include any 3s. Only those that are a 6 through a 9. So let me show you what that looks like. I have obviously that name, address, city, state, zip, and phone number in some cases. And we always, because we're a part of the American Marketing Association. So we have to follow those same guidelines that anyone would need to follow. And we always put this on our consumer data. Any of the phone numbers displayed here might be on the National Registry for Do Not Call and should not be used for phone solicitation. Ultimately, as the user of this information, you need to be in compliance with all those requirements. And I would add to that, you can get a clean list that you could call against. You could download information, send it to the National Do Not Call Registry, and they will clean your list for you, return it to you, minus those people that you can't call, and then you could call against that list. We can do the same thing. Both of us charge. So know that that is something that you could hire us to do for you, and we would then get you that clean list. With that said, let's chart this information because of this. We'll always give you that home value. We'll also give you this estimated home income. So we're getting both of those factors from the Census Bureau, and then we make some additional movement on those based on when that last census was done. And of course, we all know what's happened with our economy. So I have that information. If income is important to you, because you don't want to reach out and market to somebody that perhaps wouldn't be able to do that with you, you could certainly use this as a way by which to filter. So as I'm looking at this list, I see a good portion of them in that 100 to 124,000. So you could decide, you know what, I'm not going to do anything less than 100. Or maybe you want to say, you know what, I'm not going to do anything less than 200,000. If you wanted to do it that way, you could definitely do that. You can go back. And the other thing you might want to understand is where these people are located, but you could always revise your search now that you have some of that income information. You can, again, leave it at 1 per household, but then you could drive in that income and use that as a filter. So let's say that our magic number will begin at that 150. I could say, you know what, let's do it all the way through that 399,000. So what is that going to do to my total here? Dropped it down to 10,000. Much more manageable number. Now, you may still look at that and go, oh, I'm not going to market to 10,000 people. That's quite all right. You can always view your results. Then you could go to the heat map. So this will overlay the density of those areas. Maybe you want to focus on this bridge. Looks like Bridgewater Township. There are a lot of those donors in this area. So if you wanted to do that, guess what? We can now employ the use of the map-based search tool. So I'm going to use Bridgewater as kind of my thumbprint, if you will. I'm going to go back to my results. I already know that dollar amount that I want to focus on. I've got that, right? But what I don't have is that map information. So I'm going to kick out the county. I'm going to make sure it stays at 1 per household. Now that I've got the map, I can open that area up. I'll just say, actually, Nancy, could you give me that zip code again? And I'll just use that same zip code and find Bridgewater.
07924.
07924 and go. So now I can expand this so that I can see a bit more of that area. Nancy, Bridgewater, is that northeast, west, or south from what I'm
South going.
there it is.
Yep.
There it is. So I've got that area. Now I can I could draw my shape so that I just include that area of Bridgewater. And I could just do this. I could make that my area. I'm going to double click in there. So I have 575 results that are in that area that match my criteria. Much easier group to work with than that full group of 10,000, right? And if 575 were too big, I could change my shape, right? Doesn't matter. If I wanted to do that like this, I could even do this. I could say, you know what? I'm just going to take this part off. So there's 162 of those in there. I can just exclude that and I'll get that smaller number. So it all depends on how you want to do that. If that were it, if that were perfect for you, you can say view results, and there they are. And here's the information that you're going to see. So I'll get that address information. Everything that we've seen, Jane appears to be married.
She is.
Home. I'm sorry?
I said she is. I know her.
She is, and you know her. Been in this home for about 18 years. Then we've got that neighborhood information. So we've got that through the Census Bureau. And then there are those lifestyle indicators. And just because you see money-making opportunities also listed there, doesn't mean that you can go back and do another search and that Jane may show up in there. She may not, because she may not fall in that 6 to 9 range as it relates to that money-making opportunities. So great way to be able to get to that kind of information.
Bill, this is great. I have a nonprofit that I'm involved with, and I'm itching to go back in there now and take a look. The lifestyle and interest.
Excellent.
Yeah, the lifestyle and interest. This is the first time I've really seen that. Somebody asked, can you get a summary report of which lifestyles or interests are prevalent in your area?
No. Well, you kind of can. Let me show you this. I want to point out, so we do have this consumer snapshot section. Now, somebody might come along and say, I would love to use age as a factor. Here's what happens. As soon as I go back and revise my search, and I start including anything from this consumer snapshot section, which runs from age all the way down to veteran present, because below that is exclusions. So let's say that I want age, I want marital status, and I want children present for whatever reason. I could, one per household, I could grab some of these age ranges. I could say married and children present. I have a total now of how many? 83 results that match all that criteria. As soon as I do that, the only thing I'm allowed to see is on a chart, a matrix, or a table, that information. So let's say age is important. I know that I selected presence of children, so I don't care about that. And I know I included married, right? So I could do that by zip code, and I'll get this kind of breakdown. So I've got those age ranges, the zip codes they're in, and how many records apply to each of those zip codes. Because we consider that information sensitive, you can no longer use those consumer snapshot options by which to drive in physical results. You can only see it on that matrix table or graph.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. So know that this can be a whopper of a database. I helped a lady, and this would have been in February of 21. She owns a boarding kennel. She wanted to find dog lovers. So we went right under pets here and identified those dog lovers. And by the way, you can link these two together. If you wanted to do so, you can come under here where it says show more options, and then you can link them together. So it would only, this list is going to get really small now, if not go away, right? I've got 6 that I linked together that are charitable donors and dog lovers. So she didn't care about the charitable donors. She only wanted the dog lovers, right? So that number is going to go up a bit here. Oh, that's because I need to remove these guys. So that number goes up a bit there. I meant to do this and that. So I've got that listing. If I didn't want that, of course, that number then keeps climbing, etc. But she wanted to be able to identify those dog lovers in a specific geography that she drew so that she could bump that current list of dog lovers against her current list of dog owners that she's done business with. Anything that was going to be new would get accepted. Anything that was a duplicate, she was going to reject. And then she was going to send a mailer out to those new opportunities so that she could let them know that her business is right over here. And now that the hope of vaccines is coming and people are wanting to travel again, don't forget Fido, send him to me.
So Bill, there are no more questions, and I know we're at
we're at the bottom of that hour, aren't we? Doggone it.
The one thing I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned a number of times that you have helped this person or that person. So individuals can reach out and ask for assistance.
Yep. They can either contact any of my colleagues through this email address here, or you can provide them my email address if you'd like. And if you don't know what that is, I can give that out to folks right now.
It's on I think it's on the slide deck. We can bring that up in a minute.
Okay. Definitely point folks in my direction. I would be happy to assist them with any of these modules.
Super, because I know it's somewhat daunting when you look at all the information that's there, and to talk about how I might get started with it. Sometimes you just need somebody to point you in the right direction.
Right. And I've stopped sharing so that you can, oh, you've got it right there.
I'm one step ahead of you.
You are so quick.
So I will send these slides out. Bill's information is there. And then we did include, and it's not moving forward. Here we go. Access through Jersey Clicks, which will open to the New Jersey State Library, which was what Bill just showed.
Yep.
And then I used my Bernardsville Public Library, and I myself went in directly through my library site. So you go into the library website itself, and mine happens to be under research and learning, and you can see Data Axle Reference Solutions, and it opened to the same location. So I'll send these slides out because knowing how to get there is a critical step. So
Yeah.
Bill, I want to thank you very much for the information, and we always appreciate here at SCORE you engaging with us, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.
Very good. Thank you everyone for your time today. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Gosh, are we in Wednesday already?
We're Wednesday. I thought it was Friday earlier this
How'd
week.
that happen?
Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, I have one more quick question.
Oh, yes.
We had a thank you from Ronald. Thank you.
Excellent.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye, Nancy. Goodbye, everyone.